Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Neon Salon. Thank you once again for joining me. I have author Morgan St. James with me. She has a number of titles in her bibliography, and we will be discussing some of them today. Morgan, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Before we get started talking about your work and your titles, why don't you give us a little intro about how you got started in writing?
Oh, well, that's a story in itself. I was an interior designer, and I never had aspirations to become an author. I loved being a designer. I had my own firm with a partner, and we were approached by Designers West magazine, which at that time was a very prestigious West Coast magazine. And they had heard about a project we did. They wanted us to do an article on it. And we said, great, what better publicity could we have than to have an article in a widely circulated magazine? So the photographers came out, they did the pictures, the whole thing. All of a sudden we realized that we only had a day or two maybe to submit our article, and we had zip because we weren't writers. And we were commiserating. We were at my house drinking wine, and the more wine we drank trying to come up with a solution, the more bizarre the ideas got. And finally we said, oh, the hell with it. We're not going to be able to do this. Let's just have some fun with it. We'll do it like a noir mystery. And the editor will probably hate it and not publish it, but at least we will have held to our commitment. So we did. And we did it like, we were sitting in our design studio drinking tea when the phone rang. Kind of like an old Boston Blackie from the 40s. We submitted it and we waited for her to lambast us. And instead she called laughing. She said, I absolutely love it. I've never had anything like it. We're going to run it. And by the way, would you be interested in doing more articles for us? I wrote magazine articles. I wrote some newspaper articles. And then in the mid-90s, my sister and I decided to launch our own mystery series because she was also a published writer, but she was a political print specialist. And that was it. Silver Sisters was born.
That is a great story. That is such a cool way to get into it. When you were working as a designer, was that in Vegas or was that somewhere else?
Oh, that was in LA.
Okay.
And I had a 20-year career as an interior designer. I've had a lot of careers there. And they all come in very handy when I'm writing because I know a little bit about a lot of things. I finally transitioned into full-time writing, and most of my writing was done in Las Vegas. I used to say I lived on the 405 freeway because I went back and forth between LA and Las Vegas. And this was my writing place. This was my peaceful place. And of course, people used to laugh because they say, you go to Las Vegas for peace and quiet? And I said, where I live, it's peace and quiet. We're right in the foothills. And 2013, I moved here permanently.
What you said about Las Vegas being a writing place, I as well. I came from a very different place. I'm from Minnesota, but Vegas was also my writing place before I moved here, and I got a very similar reaction of like, why? Like, that's not what you do in Vegas.
There's a creative vibe here.
Yeah.
I don't. It's almost like it's in the air, and I know when I would drive up from LA, which was like, I would come like every couple of weeks and stay for a week and then go back to LA. As soon as I would hit St. Rose on the freeway, my entire demeanor would relax. And I knew I was coming home.
One of the questions I ask everyone who comes on the show is for a story about something they remember from the first few weeks or months that they were here. But you were kind of here before you were here.
Right.
Was there a significant difference after you had like fully landed in Vegas after that whole time? Did it feel significantly different being a local, or had you already kind of moved in?
No, I think I already considered myself kind of a semi-local. I was active at that time in Henderson Writers Group. I was active in other things. I was giving workshops at writers' conferences, both in California and here. And so, and at one point I had helped found a chapter of Sisters in Crime, which we had to disband because when all of the officers' times termed out, because it's a national organization and they have bylaws, so all of the officers termed out, and everybody loved the chapter, but they didn't want to be an officer, so we had to close the chapter. So yeah, I really felt like I was a local already. It was just that I didn't have to spend all that time on the freeway anymore.
Right. Let's get into your books. And you already mentioned the Silver Sisters mysteries, so we'll start there. And that sounds like after the article writing, after working for magazine, doing magazine work, that was your first kind of longer length project, was the first Silver Sisters mystery. Right.
My sister and I launched that together, as I said. My mom had always been our conduit. She'd tell me what Phyllis was doing. She'd tell Phyllis what I was doing, because Phyllis moved to Alaska when she was 20. And she's 5.5 years younger than me. So that was right about the time we would have been friends. And instead, we were thousands of miles apart. And then my mother had mini strokes, and Phyllis came down to help me get her resituated. And we got to know each other. And we found that among the many things that we had in common, even though we'd been apart for years, we both loved funny mysteries and we were both published writers. And so when she went back to Alaska, I called her and I said, what would you think about a mystery series with one sister who lives in California and the other who's an over-the-hill hippie in Alaska? And, I started outlining things and she said, that sounds suspiciously like us. And I said, yeah, we could model the characters after us, then we'd know what we were doing. And she said, well, I think they should be twins. And I said, great idea. She said, identical twins. Absolutely identical on the outside, very, very different on the inside. And so that was how we started working on it. And the first book was A Corpse in the Soup. The thing that happened was we had the hidden benefit because we became best friends. Sisters who had barely known each other, we became best friends through our writing. And the local newspaper here, the RJ, I think it was 2006 or 2007, did a feature article on us about sisters become best friends through writing books.
You have 5 books in that series as of 2019. Yes. And
yes,
you're working on a 6th one, is that
right?
I
was going to say, and we're working on number 6, Hit Job in Hollywood, which takes place at the seniors' home where the Silver Sisters' mother and uncle go to entertain every Thursday because they're former vaudeville magicians. And they like to get into the act. They always get in trouble. And a lot of people almost like Flossie and Sterling as much or better than the sisters themselves.
Yeah, I actually just finished this week Vanishing Act in Vegas.
Oh, so,
yeah.
Which they got into a little bit of trouble there.
Yeah, they had, I think, more to do in that mystery than the sisters did.
Yeah, we decided to, because fans have said that they like them so much, we decided to give them a book where they were pretty much the feature.
Yeah, and I mean, they're a magic act. It was Vegas. Not to give up too much away, but the story is about a magician. It makes sense to have them be the stars of that one.
And we had put all the stuff about Liberace in the book before Liberace Museum was closed. And then the book was getting ready to publish. And if we had taken that out, we would have had to rewrite big sections of the book. So we decided to dedicate it to the memory of the Liberace Museum.
Oh, that's smart. Yeah, I do. I read a lot of books that are set in Vegas. I review a lot of books that are set in Vegas. And I do wonder about how to handle that because things tend to come and go quite often here. And you have another fiction series, the Revenge is Fun series, which I don't know too much about.
That one all started when, among my many professions, I'd gone into design marketing because there was, truthfully, for me, more money in it than in doing interior design. And after several other things, I wound up working for a government contractor that marketed furniture made in federal prisons. And most people don't know that that's almost $1 billion a year industry. I mean, they think about license plates, right? But right around 150 items are made in federal prisons. And the largest volume is from office furniture. We didn't know it, but our boss was running a scam with the federal government. He had been given $5 million worth of seed money to start the marketing arm. And he sent, I don't know how many millions of it, to his sister in another state who was a councilwoman to start a business that was in direct competition with Unicorp. Eventually, my co-author and I both left that firm after several years. And then she called me one day and she said, "Hey, you're a writer, you've got a series going. I think we could do a book based on what we know about this." And of course, we couldn't have done it without knowing the internal workings of how everything happens and having actually been in federal prison factories. And so we decided to do the book Ripoff. And it was about one of the government employees in a very responsible position, embezzling from the division that made furniture in federal prisons into the millions of dollars. And we came up with this whole scheme, how that could have happened and how they could have been caught. And she wasn't a writer, but she was a good idea person. You know, so she'd feed me all these ideas that she had. And this was kind of our way on getting revenge against this firm that had basically done us in. And so then I thought, boy, revenge mysteries would be fun. You know, so then I did Payback. And Denny Griffin, who's a true crime author, and I did Bumping Off Fat Vinny, which was also kind of a revenge thing based in reality. All of these were based in reality, you know, but obviously twisted and turned into fiction and things that didn't happen. And then the last one, called Scammed, I always wanted to kill this guy in print. He was the president of an HOA that really made big problems for my ex-husband and I when we lived in Los Angeles and cost us $40,000 in attorney's fees. And I always said I was going to kill this guy in print, you know, that way I wouldn't have to go to jail. And anyway, it was hard to find the right vehicle to do that. And then all of a sudden, one day I got the inspiration and I thought, oh boy, this would be a good book in the Revenge is Fun series. And I put that book together, and then I decided to search his name and found out that he'd had the nerve to die before I could kill him.
Just getting you until the very end, right?
The Revenge is Fun books are all fun books, you know, like in Bumping Off Fat Vinny, being that Denny Griffin is a true crime writer, and he got me into a couple of true crime books as well. And he did several books with Frank Collada, who was the second in command to Tony Spilatro, who was the head of the mob here. And so on some of the things where they're trying to knock off their publisher, Frank was the one who gave us some input on different scams that we could do.
There's not a new book in that series, though. The latest one was 2019.
Not yet. I've been thinking about what the next one, because I started a first book in another series.
Okay.
It's fun to do series because I wind up liking my characters, you know?
Yeah.
And so last year I released Watson Falls, a small town with a deadly secret. And the main character in that, Mac Peters, he can become a character in a series. And he has the ability, he's wealthy, he's a former cop, and he has the ability to move around wherever he wants to because his business basically runs itself. So I've traveled a great deal. I'm familiar with a lot of locations, and so I can put him anywhere I want to for a story.
Watson Falls came out in 2020. It came out last year, right? And so Watson Falls, where is that put in the world? What country or state is that in?
Oh, it's in Washington State, and it's a very remote, small town that is barely on the map, but it's a very unique town with this deadly secret.
And that's another mystery.
Yes.
Potential series.
Yeah, that one is actually more, it's not a funny mystery. Okay. That one is a little more adventurous.
In addition to your mystery series, you also do true crime books.
Yes. Actually, both of those came through referrals from Denny Griffin when he was approached, and he was too involved in projects to take it on, although he did in both cases act in an advisory capacity.
Okay.
And they're both for very, very strong women who survived horrible abuse. The No More Crying Angels, Bella Capo was a white woman boss in the Crips, and she was the daughter of a power broker who had his own kind of mob, and she was very abused. And it's an inspirational story. It's raw. Both of them are raw. The women did not want things sugar-coated. They wanted it to be the way it was. And so they're actually memoirs that I helped them write. And Bella has devoted herself to helping abuse victims. Cheryl Cuccio, she's been on a lot of TV programs now. She was the abused daughter of a fellow whose wife had died. And she was about 11 years old when he started sexually abusing her and physically abusing her. By the time she was 16, he was starting to go after her 8-year-old sister. And she'd promised her mother on her deathbed that she'd watch out for her sister. And she hired a classmate to kill her father. And she kind of changed her mind midway, but 5 months later, he shot her father 5 times in their driveway. And she wound up going to prison for only 3.5 months. It was a 6-month sentence because she was a teenager at the time and she was a victim. She married her boyfriend when she got 9 months after she got out of prison. They had 2 beautiful daughters. In 2013, I believe, her husband had a massive heart attack and he died. And she would not let him go. And she begged the doctor, she prayed to her mother in heaven, everything. And she made the doctors keep trying even after they had pronounced him dead after 30 minutes. And at 43 minutes, he came back to life. And Rob is back at work as an oncology nurse. He is able to really counsel his patients because he's been on the other side. And Cheryl has become an extreme advocate for helping abuse victims.
You mentioned that these women were referred to you by another collaborator of yours. What was his name again?
Oh, Denison Griffin. He's a true crime author and historian.
You'd met him before and had collaborated with him on, it sounds like, the Revenge is Fun series, and then he started referring true crime.
Yeah, when he wasn't able to, because he had a full plate. I really enjoyed working with Denny because we're very similar in our approaches to things. When Bella had contacted him, he was very interested in the story, but just unable to devote full time to it. And when he first called me about it, I said, no, Denny, I don't do true crime and I've got a lot of projects just like you do. And he said, let me send you her punch list of things that she wants to cover in the book. And so I started going down the whole thing. And the first impression was that she was going to be a much older person than I thought she was. But the second impression was, white woman boss in the Crips? I need to know more about this. And so I called him and I said, yeah, I'll do it. And it turned out that Bella was just 40, I think, at the time, and was a grandmother and had lived enough lives for 5 people.
It's a bit of a bridge to cross between kind of funny, cozy mysteries and something like this kind of true crime.
Very, very different approaches. But even with that, both of them, we tried to find some humor to lighten things up a little bit, because, you know, my mom was a phenomenal mentor. And her philosophy was, if you can find humor, even in the worst situation, it'll help you get through. And it proved itself over and over again for both my sister and I. So I am part of that to them. And actually, I gave each of them a copy of my mother's memoir. Bella, for the longest time, carried the book in her handbag as inspiration, because she said she wished she'd had a grandma like that. She wrote it when she was 85 years old, because I told her that if she didn't do that, all her stories would be lost. And they were wonderful stories, because she was born in 1909, and she was the youngest of 10 children of an immigrant family. And they didn't have much money, but they had a lot of laughs. And the neighbors would knock at the door and they would say, "Can we come in and laugh too?" And that's where the title of the book came from.
So when it came to kind of starting into the true crime stories that you were eventually going to write, what was the process?
What we had to do was, first, both of these women had been through so many things that if you include too many things, people start to think, maybe that's not true, you know? And so, first of all, we had to get an overview of everything that they had been through, everything they had experienced, things that were possibilities to put in the book, and then go down the list and see which ones we could eliminate to tighten things up. And then I wanted to be very, very sure that these books were written in their voice, not mine. And so we did a lot of preliminary phone conversations. I had not met either one of them until the manuscripts were finished. And because Bella lives in a state that hasn't been disclosed because she was in hiding, and Cheryl and Rob live in New York. Then we started going into things, and I would have them write out the vignettes of the different experiences in their own words. And then I would edit them and shape them. I would see what other information I needed for that particular experience. I would tell them which things I thought we should leave out, and, you know, kind of massage it around, make sure that even though it was in their voice, it was well written. Then we did a list of the chapters, and several times we moved them around. We started out in chronological order, then some of them needed to be moved to different places. And that was kind of how the procedure went, and nothing went to print without their approval.
That seems like a very delicate relationship, like you're taking a big responsibility with their story.
It became so close. Like I said, they became like my kids. Mm-hmm. And Cheryl's mother passed away when Cheryl was a preteen. So her mother-in-law became like her mother, but then her mother-in-law passed away. So I'm kind of surrogate mom sometimes. And Bella's mother she died under mysterious circumstances a couple of years ago. But Bella has always said she has 3 mothers. She had 3 mothers. She had her regular mother. She had the actress Ally McGraw, who was her unofficial godmother and actually did the foreword to her book. And then she had me. And so she calls me Mama B, Mama
Aww.
Bella.
So you're still in touch with both of them in that case?
Oh, yes, all the time.
Okay. Are you considering, or would you consider doing another true crime book in the future if the opportunity presented?
Bella has been through some other experiences that were bone-chilling since the book was published. When she is ready, we will write about this other thing of her mother's mysterious death, which quite frankly, the officials kind of sloughed off.
You've also written a book, a nonfiction book for writers, more of a guide book. If you could talk a little about how that came about and what that's.
I've given a lot of workshops at conferences, and I used to write an online magazine called Writer's Tricks of the Trade. And so when people would ask me if I had a book after I gave a workshop, I'd say, no, but you can go online to what Writer's Tricks of the Trade, you know, all the issues are archived there and you can find some really good articles. And then finally I thought, I've written over 600 articles on the craft and business of writing. I also used to write for a couple of online sites on writing. And why can't I pick out some of those articles and put together a good guidebook? So I did. I picked out 39 of the best and most informative articles and put them into book form called Writer's Tricks of the Trade, 39 Things You Need to Know About Writing Fiction. It's not a super techie book. It's written in prose. It's very easy to read and follow. There are some personal experiences in it, ones that worked and ones that backfired terribly, and I'd hate to see other writers do. There are some exercises in the book. It's just kind of a nice little handy handbook to refer to on things. And then at the back of the book is a bibliography of in-depth books that I've used on various topics. And so any one of the books in the bibliography is something that I felt was worthwhile enough for me to use.
One of the last questions I had before we get to the wrap up here is about your approach to marketing. So first of all, does Writer's Tricks of the Trade, does it cover marketing or does it cover more of like craft?
I have done probably what a lot of people do, you know, the Facebook presence, the Twitter presence, LinkedIn. I've tried ads. I haven't seen any great response from them. And workshops, I usually had quite a bit of response after workshops. And again, I do my workshops the way I speak. It's just, they're not super techie things, but every one of them has things in it that you can use and use them right away. In fact, I've done a workshop for writers called Pumping Up Your Personality, and how you, it's a interactive workshop. And at first people were shy to come up and do the thing. And pretty soon they were lined up waiting for their turn. It's not even so much as the going out and meeting people, but when you're a writer, the odds are there are going to be opportunities when you read from your work. And if you read from your work, like I'm reading from my book and I'm telling you all about this, you're going to put the people to sleep. They're not going to be inspired to, you know, buy your book. You need to learn how to read to a crowd from your book. A good portion of being a writer is being able to get yourself out there, because nobody's going to come knocking on your door and say, I hear you wrote a book. Can I buy a copy?
Wouldn't that be nice?
Oh, wait a minute. There's somebody at my door.
What are the odds? Okay, so we talked a little about one of the titles you have coming up, the new Silver Sisters mystery. You also have a story coming out in the new Chicken Soup for the Soul book. Is that right?
Yes. And it's the book for Alzheimer's and dementia. And it's a book called, it's a story called Grandma's External Hard Drive. And when my mom had the mini strokes, it stole her short-term memory. And so we came up with this method of making her a little book in those photo folders where they have like space for 20 or 30 in little windows. And we did it on index cards, and we took every question that she asked repetitively and made a page for it with the question and the answer. And then on the facing one was some photo of people with their names and what their relationship was to her. And my oldest son dubbed that Grandma's External Hard Drive. And if she would get agitated because she couldn't remember something, She always had a copy of that. I don't know how many of them I made because they got really worn from her using them a lot. And she would go to her purse, and that was the only thing that was in her purse in the nursing home. And she'd take out her book and she'd say, "This is my important book." And she'd read it and say, "Oh, that's okay, now I know." And so, that was a great tool. I was fortunate. My mom was a very sweet person. And in her dementia, she never got mean like some do. She was still very loving and very encouraging. And she always inspired people to believe in themselves, even when she had dementia. And like my kids would come to visit her and she would say, "So what are you doing now, darling?" And my son would say, "Oh, my oldest son was a national motivational speaker." And he said, "Well, I'm doing a speaking tour, Grandma." And she, "Oh, that is so good, honey. I know you're so successful at that. And there's always a need for that." And she would do that with them, even though she couldn't remember from one minute to the next. But that was inherent in her. That's what she did with my sister and I. She inspired us to believe we could do anything we set our minds to, and we usually do. That makes my sixth story in a chicken soup book.
When is this latest one, publishing?
I went on Amazon and I noticed I don't know if it's up for pre-sale. It was supposed to be released in June, but I see it's already up on Amazon.
Oh, okay, cool. And that is Chicken Soup for the Soul, Living with Alzheimer's and Dementia.
Right.
Okay. So people can go get that on Amazon if they want to check that out. And how else can people keep up with your latest work or your news?
You can find all kinds of information on my website, and my Facebook is @Morgan St. James, as is Twitter. And I have to say, I've been off Twitter for a while. I'm going to be going back on. This pandemic has altered things for not only me, but a lot of writers, I think.
I don't know how it was for everyone else. It's kind of off topic, but for me, like at the very beginning of the pandemic, I was tied to Twitter, Facebook, all of it, and just like updating constantly. And then somewhere around the beginning of this year, end of last year, I was just like, "Oh, I'm done."
It was so obsessive and hard to be creative when every day you turned on the TV and you had new death counts and new tolls and all the political aggravation and everything else. And you go, "Now I'm supposed to go be funny."
Yeah. I have to imagine that trying to write a mystery comedy must have been particularly hard. I write comedy horror, so I get to be a little bit dark, which was nice. But yeah, doing something like lighthearted, like Silver Sisters, I don't think I could have done it.
Well, it's taken us a long time to work on this latest book.
Mm-hmm.
We worked on it, we put it down, we worked on it, we put it down. Now we're working on it full swing again.
Another question I ask everyone that comes
Sure.
on the show. If you were to encounter a writer that had just moved to Las Vegas or was considering moving to Las Vegas, specifically a writer, what would you tell them in terms of advice or guidance about that decision?
It's important to be interacting with other writers for many reasons. Some of the groups are critique groups, some of the groups are educational groups, and it's always nice to have the interactions with people that think like you do and learn from each other. I credit Henderson Writers Group with helping me a lot. I joined that writers group, I think, in 2006, and I haven't been active in it for the past couple of years. But, then I got involved with Writers of Southern Nevada. And there are also other things to become involved with. And I think there's like Henderson Writers Group has Dime Grind Reads, where they do readings from members' works. That's what I would suggest. The other one, of course, is the standard one. Don't give up, stick to it, get your education, go to workshops. But I think writers' groups are very important.
Thank you very much for being here with me today. This was great.
It was fun. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. And thanks everyone for watching, and we will see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.